You're listening to the Kaiju Apostle podcast, Building a Bridge Edition. Thanks for tuning in to the Kaiju Apostle podcast, Building a Bridge Edition. This is a little different than what we normally do, so if you're looking for a deep analysis of kaiju and tokusatsu films, not the episode to listen to. We've got plenty of those, though. But if you're wanting something that would hopefully encourage some positive things in the fandom, like we strive to do, then I encourage you to keep on listening. Just to give a little bit of clarity and context on what this is before you listen to the actual episode. And so about a month or so ago, I wrote an article about building a bridge in the fandom. And I made an analogy of just kind of this divide between I like the monster fights and I like the humans, right? And we kind of touched on that in one of the episodes already. But Chris and I were talking about how can we do something to kind of fill up some time in between episodes, right? Because it's just bi-weekly at this point. And we thought that it might be interesting and helpful to highlight people in the fandom that are making a difference. People that through their artwork or the posts that they share and just the way that they try to encourage listening and understanding, right? We want to highlight these people. And not only just that, but highlighting people that maybe have a different opinion than you, right? I think, ultimately in this fandom, we have a lot of very opinionated people, which is awesome. But we need to remember that people who have different opinions, that's not a bad thing. And we should encourage ourselves to listen and to try to comprehend why people may feel differently. So the goal of these episodes is just to kind of highlight voices that, just to highlight the variation, the differences within this fandom, how, as our guest will explain, we're all coming together for the same reason, because we love Godzilla and we love these films. We may love different films, and we may love them for different reasons, but ultimately, that's why we're here. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy this episode of the podcast. We'd love to hear some feedback, see what you think. If you have anyone that you think would be a good fit for this, we would love to hear from you as well. But also, we do have an announcement at the end of the episode. So if you could tune in for that as well. I know a lot of people don't listen to bumpers on podcasts, but it would mean a lot if you did. So... and here we go. All right. So for this first episode of Building a Bridge, I've got Unite_Godzilla_fans. That's his Instagram handle. Joining me tonight. How are you doing?
Doing great. Good, sir. How are you doing tonight?
Good. And I realize I'm going to refer to you as UGF from here on out.
I like it.
But yeah, so I've already kind of done an introduction for what we're doing with this episode, but like I brought up to you, the reason why I wanted you to start this out here is joining Instagram, I guess the Instagram Godzilla fandom. It's almost like there's all these different subsets, right?
Mm-hmm,
but joining earlier in the year, which, wow, it's already been a year. You were one of the first people that I actually started talking to on a more one-to-one basis. Because I found when I got involved, and this isn't a slight, it was just a bunch of 13 and 14-year-olds, which that's fine. I'm glad that you guys are interested in Godzilla. But I mean, let's be honest, there is definitely a little bit of a disconnect between 14-year-olds and 30-year-olds. So there's only so much that I'm like, I need to talk to someone that's more my age. And I think it was right around G-Fest is when I found you on there and we started chatting a bit. And I just immediately was drawn to the fact that your whole Instagram is centered around trying to unite Godzilla fans. Like, that's something that coming into the fandom, leaving the Star Wars fandom, I've realized like that's so important. So I wanted to start out with that because this is really why I'm doing this segment of the podcast is how can we not only hear another person's story, right? We're so eager to speak over people, we don't hear what they have to say. So how do we kind of take a minute to step back and listen to someone else's story, but also sharing stories from people that I believe are doing positive things in the fandom that maybe aren't being recognized for that. So, like I said, that's why I wanted to start out with you. And so, I guess for the first part, if you could tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, obviously outside of Godzilla and Kaiju films.
Um, Absolutely, and thank you very much for having me. Outside of the fandom and the social media world, I am a manager in retail. I live alone. I'm all around funny guy. I like to go out, do haunted stuff, go on haunted areas, drive in movie theaters. Very um, worldly activities, I guess to say, and kind of just live life day to day. There's really not much else. I also hang with my lovely woman every day, who is awesome, and she's very supportive of my Godzilla nerdism, which is always good to have.
Absolutely.
And then that's my basic life. The I guess now getting into the franchise of it, and what it's done. Um, there's more to that than um, I can even express.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that has helped me and has helped a lot of people throughout their lives.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of people looking from the outside in, they're like, well, why do you guys spend so much time on, movies with dudes in suits, right? And I kind of want to be like, well, a lot of time it's coming from people who love sports, which as someone who used to play sports, I'm kind of like, yeah, but you're also watching games with people in suits too. Like, what's really the difference
Right.
here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so what got you into Godzilla to begin with?
I mean, I quote my mother on this one because she always tells me the story, and I always ask her because I tend to forget.
Yeah.
I was always into dinosaurs. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was definitely my favorite one, of course. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a boy. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
And she recalls, and like I said, I'm quoting her on this one, that one day it was when the television station TNT was around, they had Monster Vision.
Mm-hmm.
And this was what year? She told me to. I forgot the year. Um, Somewhere in the 90s, early 90s. Godzilla versus Mothra was on, and I said, "Big lizard that breathes fire. Okay, this
Yeah.
is cool. I need to know more." And ever since then, I absolutely fell in love with it. Um, and it's just been a huge impact and a stamp in my life.
And to clarify, you're talking about Mothra versus Godzilla, right? The one in the 60s or
Yes,
the
the
90s?
1964 film. No,
Okay.
1964.
Yeah, because that's the thing where people, they'll be like, yeah, my favorite's Godzilla versus Mothra. I'm like, okay. So to continue this conversation, I need to clarify which one we're talking about. 'Cause if it's
Fair
the one
enough.
from the
I'm
90s,
not.
then
No, we'll talk about things. I'm always good with titles. I'm just like, yeah, Godzilla versus Mothra, and in fact, you're right. It is Mothra versus Godzilla. So
yeah. And it's funny. Someone brought up in another podcast about how uh, it's almost apt that they call it Mothra versus Godzilla because it's almost more of a Mothra film than a Godzilla film, like the way it's shot and the feel of it. So I'm like, it is kind of appropriate that they did that.
that's true. It is. It is. Godzilla's kind of the co-host.
Yeah. So I mean, let's just go ahead and ask the question. Like, what is your favorite Godzilla film?
Oh, I will say this to the day I die, and the most emotional one, Godzilla versus Destroyer.
Yeah.
That I love the effects used in it,
Mm-hmm.
the suit and Godzilla's design alone was just such a gnarly design. It definitely showed his anger, his
Mm-hmm.
strength, his power, that his own body is his worst enemy.
Hmm.
And I think there are times as we're growing up where we feel that way. It's like we're going through these emotions and we're dealing with life, and it's just like I have this burning, raging fire inside of me that's going to explode. For any of the male listeners, we all know how that is growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, and
And
oh, go ahead, sorry.
oh no, and you know, it just even Destroyer himself, or I don't know how to say it properly. Don't give me any
No,
slack.
I'm not. I'm not.
I know it's ORO. I
I
don't
just
know how
always
that's
says is
pronounced.
Destoroyah, but that's just how I
Okay,
say it. The red
all
guy.
right, fair enough. The right guy, the devil. Um, and that he was just a gnarly foe, man. Like you can't get any better than that right there.
Yeah, it's one of those films that even for the people I think that don't love it, it's hard not to appreciate a lot about it. I mean, I don't think I can resonate necessarily with like the whole like, you know, I think it's a meme that's going around when the girl is like, "You didn't cry during Titanic," and then it's bringing up all the scenes from this film, right? So like, I can't quite resonate with that, but at the same time, I mean, there is just something like at this point, it, you know, granted, I wasn't watching the films as it came out, but this really felt like the end of an era. You know, it's like we bring Godzilla back and then we kill him off. You know, we didn't have that in
Hmm.
the Showa era, right? And then all of a sudden, the Heisei era, it's like we're going to bring him back and then we're going to kill him. It's supposed to be like this really big, meaningful thing. And then America screwed up Godzilla, and Toho's like, nope, we're going to try this again. You know? So,
Hands down, dude. And I mean, just the way they ended it.
mhm.
I mean, you have that beautiful music, that sad, beautiful music
Oh, geez, yeah.
that just overpowers everything, and that last final roar from the king himself. You just, I mean, I'll tell you what. 95 watching it, I cried heavily. I was like, oh no, no, I can't do this, and just tears flowing down my face, and it I was probably scarred for a little bit, but to be like for anyone to say like I don't like that movie because of it, it's like what are you doing, man? Like that's such a iconic scene
Yeah,
and movie.
yeah. And that's what I'm saying is I feel like at least in the circles that I found myself gravitating towards, even the people who are maybe a little bit more critical of the film, there's still a lot they appreciate about it, right? I mean, at the end of
Right.
the day, like I even think like with the Heisei era, like the best films bookend it, where you have you know Return of Godzilla, and then you have Destoroyah. Like those are my two favorite out of the whole era. So it's
Hmm.
kind of it's it's a lot better than some people make it out to be. I think is definitely something people can be a little bit too critical about. So, so obviously you love Godzilla. There's no way around that.
Hmm.
But do you find yourself watching similar films in the genre? Like, do you watch any other tokusatsu films, kaiju films, anything like that?
I mean, I've been branching out like um this past year's G
Hmm.
Fest. They were playing on one TV channel all Japanese movies, and they were showing like the Ultraman franchise,
Hmm.
and I got into an Ultraman through that way, and it's kind of like I definitely try to be open minded about it, but something it just doesn't catch me as well. Like the Ultraman movies, they're cool, you know, they have the elements of guy in a rubber suit, miniatures being destroyed, big kaiju rampaging on and on, but it never seems to catch me the way Godzilla films have. But I definitely, if I see something that's looks eye opening, I'm like, yeah, I'll check it out. Like I think it's what is it? The Howl in the Fog or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. That looks incredible.
It really does, and it's I'm like so excited to like when it comes out. Like I need to watch this movie because it has so many new elements to it, but it still has a monster in it,
Yeah.
and that's
It
awesome.
still has that classic feel, and it's for our listeners, it's How from Beyond the Fog is the name. You were
Ah,
close. You didn't
okay.
fail the test. So,
Ah, woo.
but so I mean,
Let's
have
get a
you watched
B.
anything like the original Rodan, Mothra, War of the Gargantuous, anything like that? I mean, because technically those aren't Godzilla
I've
films.
right. I've seen them. I've seen Mothra and
Hmm.
Rodan. Um, Haven't seen the gargantuan films. I've saw what was that one? I can't remember the name. The Atragon. Is that how you say it?
Etrigan.
I'm
Yep.
bad at this. There you go. Saw that one, and I only saw it because of Godzilla Final Wars. I wanted to know the history of it, and like, because it was such a big deal that it was in there. I'm like, why is that such a big deal? Well, there was a
Hmm.
movie of it, and I'm like, oh, okay, let me check it out. So, the War of Gargantua movies, I kind of don't have the biggest interest in seeing them. I don't know. It's like, all
Yeah.
right, that's cool. They fight big giant Bigfoots fighting. I don't want to call it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. But other than that, it's like, I mean, personally, I would love to see maybe a King Ghidorah film
Hmm.
standalone. That would be kind of cool. I mean, even I do love the Mothra trilogy. I thought those were phenomenal.
Yeah, they're definitely
You definitely,
underrated for sure.
yeah. Oh yeah. Actually, this year's G Fest, my main go-to was getting a original Grand King Ghidorah figure. Um, that was like my main go-to from Mothra Rebirth
Hmm.
3 or whatever it's called. Because I find that design absolutely menacing and insanely awesome. Um, so that's like I don't like completely like limit myself to just Godzilla movies. If I see something that'll catch my eye, I'm like, all right, let me check it out, see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's it. Is we're at that point with society, but just with technology and everything, where we can expose ourselves to newer things that you couldn't even like 10, 15 years ago. It was so much harder to watch these films, right? I mean, just this year alone, we finally got King Kong vs. Godzilla in Japanese released legally in the United States. Like it took that
Right.
long for that to be the case. So I think it's just one of those things where, if you're exposed to it, most people don't dislike it, right? I mean, like, what was your just kind of overall thoughts about like Atragon, for example? I mean, I don't know if you watched it in the Japanese or English, but I mean, that's personally one of.
I I I do
Mhm.
Japanese, 100%.
Okay, good man, good man.
I mean, it was cool. It definitely had my
Hmm.
attention, and for that little bit of Manda, which it was cool to see that kaiju in that movie and kind of get the base of that. I was like, all right, like I mean, don't get me wrong, the Atragon design is pretty gnarly too because it actually reminds you of something from like the Ninja
Yeah,
Turtles,
I can
like
see
the
that.
cartoon. Um, and so that to me was like, all right, I can, and in quotes, relate to it in that sense that it reminded me of something old that I liked as well. So it was a cool. I definitely, if they would make like something else with it, I'd be more than down to watch it.
Yeah. See, I saw Atragon for the first time, and I really just felt like it was the film. Like if you watch Godzilla vs Megalon, like so much of that is just really ripped from Atragon, but not done nearly as well, in my opinion. You just replace the
Right.
Empire of Mu with the Seatopians, and it's pretty similar.
Mm,
Um,
good old
yeah,
Seatopians.
jeez. So, what about this past year? I mean, what was your favorite non-Godzilla film this past year?
Whew. It Chapter 2.
Really?
Yeah, I love what they did with that film, and I love that they did it in two
Hmm.
parts. That they had the children go first, and then the adults. I think the cast that they got to kind of show the growth of the kids, spot on. Even for the chubby kid Ben, who grows up to be this, I guess he's a millionaire or whatever, and he's dashing and whatnot. Um, they did a phenomenal job, and Pennywise, it's even cooler to see him be more
Hmm.
nasty. There's a lot of times where he's ripping, you know, kids in half and whatnot. I was like, oh, okay. And then it has a little humor to it
Hmm.
as well. I don't actually forgot the guy's name. Uh, but he brings in the comic relief to it,
Bill
and
Hader.
it's not. Yes, Bill Hader. I was gonna say Chris Hader or Hager. I was like, ugh, I'm gonna get wrecked for this. But he brings that to the table, and it's not like that one dude in King of the Monsters who kind of just slings it across the room. You're like, oh, that was funny.
Yeah.
You kind of get a good laugh out of what he's doing in chapter two. So that was definitely my favorite movie of the year aside from King of the Monsters.
Yeah, so I grew up watching the original with Tim Curry, like as a kid, and
Mm,
then as
classic.
an adult, I'm just like, I want nothing to do with this. Like, I don't want to touch it at all. I started watching the first chapter and I got to the sewer scene just in the beginning. I'm like, nope, I'm done. I
Oof.
am done with this. I don't know. It's any film that has to do with kids is really hard now being a
Mm,
parent. Like I even
of
remember watching
course.
God, it was an episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars and these kids were being kidnapped and I was an emotional wreck and I'm like I hate my life. So I'm not even going to touch a movie like this. I can't do it. Um
No, I mean I can understand that.
yeah. So here at the end, because like I said in the introduction, the goal here is just to have a small conversation and really just hear from different people with different opinions, just to remind everyone that like we're all coming to the same fandom, with different interests and different perspectives, but ultimately all should be welcome to the table. I really believe that. Unless you're a neo-Nazi, then you can stay away. But that being said, I mean the ultimate question here is like what does the fandom mean to you and what do you feel like not necessarily that we're doing wrong but like what are you trying to do to invest in the fandom because I think that's kind of setting this first episode. I had someone actually message me on Twitter earlier or not message me, they had posted something along the lines of like I don't feel like I interact with a lot of people on here. Does that make me a bad person? I'm like, well, of course it doesn't make you a bad person, but at the end of the day, we can't just expect to take, right? If we just take and take and take and
Right.
take and take, there's going to be nothing left. Part of a fandom is we have to invest as well. So if we want to see a fandom grow and be healthy, then we have to invest those things. So all of that said, like, what does the fandom mean to you and what are you trying to do to invest in this fandom so that it can be the best that it can be?
I mean, growing up in the 90s, we didn't have social
Hmm.
media. We didn't have any of this, and there was really no way to interact with other fans. I only The only thing I ever went to that was Godzilla related was back in '95. Uh, Before G Fest was called G Fest, it was called G Con, and they had it in New York City. And I went there, and you had the people, the adults talking to other adults, and when not many kids were there, so it was like, I kind of feel left out. I really don't know what's going on. I went to just buy some things with my father, who took me at the time, and it was that. And then as I grew up, I was like, man, I wish I had more people to interact with and talk to because, like I want to share, I want to know other people's opinions and hear what they say and have great conversations. And then as social media started to come into play and have a huge role in our lives, sadly to say, you know, I was like, all right, you know what? It's time to give back. It's time to give what I didn't have at that time. So honestly, the page has only been it's only been over a year old. So it's still pretty new, and um, I have people sometimes messaging me going, like how I want to meet more people, I want to talk to more people. How do I go about doing that? And I'm like, dude, just start talking in the post or just add, like, discuss,
Hmm.
conversate. And I think one of my biggest things, and I love saying this, is if you find someone that you disagree with or has a different opinion than you, find out why.
Yep.
Learn about their opinions and accept it. It doesn't mean they're not a fan. I mean, we have people who love the 98 film. I don't. And if someone else does, that's cool on them. Hey, let me know why you like that film so much. Really? Okay, maybe I'll give the film a second chance to see if I see what you see, or vice versa. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you don't like this, then you can't be in here. It's like, I mean, I hear stories about the Star Wars fan base I know nothing about, but I heard that place is like a sludge pool. So, and that's definitely something I don't want to see in this fandom, because this fandom has done so much for me in a lot of dark times in my life. And some of these kids that have messaged, and I'm sure you get them as well, like they're going through
Hmm.
things. There's a family struggle, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, what I do. And I remember telling one dude, I'm like, dude, be Godzilla. Just be Godzilla. You stomp through those struggles. You do your atomic breath on your enemies, if figuratively speaking, not physically.
I'd hope so.
Um, and you push through. You don't bow down. You don't break. And people have said that's why not I think of that. And it's just like, I would love to see these kids carry on, because to be real, these younger kids are going to be the reason why Godzilla is still
Yep.
around. Like after we're long and gone, this has got to be protected. And I think we don't need any toxic uh, things in this fandom, because it's such a warm and welcoming feeling. You go to G Fest and you just see the love in all these kids and adults. I've met plenty of adults there. I mean, I've been going for my second year was this year, and I've met some really amazing kids, really amazing adults who I talk to on a good basis. And they love that as well. They love the positivity in it. And it's like, so what if I don't know what song title that is, or what the camera guy was? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
If you want to tell me, you tell me. Cool. I can learn from you. We can all learn from each other in this fandom. So it's like, why be one of those, you know, elitist fans, which boggles my mind that there's such a thing in this franchise and fandom. It's like, dude, we're all the same. Why are you acting different?
Yeah. And
So,
something you just brought up is,
mm,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
no, go
off,
ahead,
but
dude. Go
like,
ahead,
I
dude.
think you're absolutely right. So there's a post that went around and I shared it, I think, on Instagram, but it said, you're allowed to like a thing without knowing every single fact about it. You're allowed to like a movie without knowing every actor's name, a book without memorizing every page, a video game without knowing all the Easter eggs. Liking things isn't supposed to be stressful.
Right.
And that's a huge thing where even we do our episodes and I'm like, ah, crap, I totally forgot who that person's name is, right? And I even have the notes in front of me. I'm like, come on. But I think speaking to what you're talking on here is ultimately we have to take a second and remember that everyone we're having these conversations with is an actual person, right?
Right.
And we don't know what they're going through. And for me, there's a lot of things I try to inject in this podcast, or even what I do on like the Instagram page and stuff like that. But ultimately, I feel like we have a chance here we can disagree with people and stuff like that, right? But we have a chance to be different. We have a chance to do something different that maybe other fandoms don't. And my philosophy in all of this is when we disagree with people, we don't know what they're going through in their real life, right? And I think Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he was a Lutheran pastor who was actually captured by the Nazis and executed, and he was put to death a few days before World War II even ended. But one of his quotes is, we must learn to regard people less in light of what they do or omit to do, and more in light of what they suffer. So when I
Mm,
look at these conversations, first of all, we don't always know the age, right? Like if I find out someone's 13, 14, I'm going to be a lot more gracious towards them. And then if, a 30-year-old spouting off, and I'm like, all right, man, you should know better than that.
right.
But ultimately, I have conversations with numerous people where, one person in particular, obviously I'm not going to share who they are, But, they had mentioned just, going through not only depression, but like, suicide and all this stuff. And obviously they didn't go through with it. But these are things that people are going through. So when we go on and we're just antagonizing people, like, we don't think about the ramifications of what could happen in that person's life outside of this stupid disagreement. Right. And I just think, what you said about, taking a chance to like, okay, well, you like this movie for this reason. Maybe I should actually consider that. It doesn't mean you have to change your mind, but at least you could be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I don't agree with you, but it makes sense. Like that right there, I think would change the tone of these conversations substantially if we would take that time to actually listen and process and consider instead of just trolling all the time.
Right. I mean, I have one of my buddies. He loves the Godzilla the series animated show, and I'm like,
Mhm.
no. Like before, I was like, no, no, no. Like it's bad. Whatever. He's like, no, no, I love it. And then I was like, all right, let me watch it again because at the time I was young. 98 came out, so it's like, yeah, why am I gonna watch something I hate? Meh. Um, but I gave it a chance, and I could see the appeal. It just wasn't my taste. So, hey,
Mhm.
man, thank you for you know telling me what you liked. I invested my time in checking it out, and it wasn't for me still. But more power to you, man. Like, go like
Yeah.
it. That's cool. You know.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So before we close, you definitely need to do your own podcast because having this accent, man, I'm just like, this is what the podcast has been missing. Like ours, I'm like, me and Chris are just these Midwesterners that have like no accent at all. And then you jump on here and I'm like, man, like, yeah, ooh, okay. So
it's, it's
anyway,
it's it's that I grew up in New York for I lived in New York for 26 years, and I've been a Jersey resident for I don't even know now. But my New York accent has not left, and it's the funniest thing ever is when people hear me talk, they're like, "That's what you sound like." I'm like, "Yeah, I know."
yeah, I never would have guessed it. I mean, it's just, yeah, it was funny. As soon as we started talking earlier, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a fun episode. Um, but UGF, I do appreciate you taking the time to talk about this because this is exactly encapsulates what I'm wanting to do with this. And to be fair, I know Chris isn't a part of this episode, but this is something we both discussed and felt like this would kind of help not only provide a little bit more content since we're only bi-weekly with the movies, but just giving, like I said, just giving us a chance to be like, okay, like these are real people we're having these conversations with. It is okay to disagree. It is important that we're actually hearing each other. So yeah, I really appreciate that you did take the time to join us today. And if you have any word of encouragement before you go, that would be awesome. If not, I'll record the end bumper after this.
I mean, I definitely want to take time to thank you, and you know, you and I have definitely bonded on many levels above Godzilla, music and
Hmm.
everything. And what you do with the podcast and everything, like I'm a huge fan of the podcast, absolutely. And I'm gonna give you a little plug. If you haven't checked them out, go listen to them because it's good. It's good stuff.
I appreciate that.
And you know, you're definitely an all around great dude, and what you do is definitely inspiring as well to me. I'm like, I gotta get. I mean, I said it before. I can't do the Twitter thing. I haven't tried recently, but I'm like, he said
Yeah, you
Twitter.
haven't
Now I
updated
need to
since
try.
like October.
I know I need to get. I had to get a new phone because my phone broke, and I just didn't re-download. But I'm gonna because you said Twitter. I'm like, I gotta get back on there because who knows what's been up. But in the end of it all, I think people need to realize that you know the one biggest thing that separates us from a lot of fandoms is that we are a family um, of brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, and we're here for each other. I will quote a band. Throwdown, one of their old albums. You don't have to be blood to be family. Yeah, I'm bringing it back. You don't have to be blood to be family. And I've told plenty of people that, and I will always forever stick to it. My love goes out to everybody in this fandom. And, just as you, if someone's having an issue, come talk to us.
Mhm.
We don't bite, we don't yell, we listen, and we just want to bring the love and the happiness to this community, because this community is the most different one out of all. I'm gonna completely say with full honesty here, and that's something that we need to embrace. We need to embrace this family factor that's in here. We're all brought by the same thing, and that's this big, gigantic radioactive lizard. And what's not to love? What's not to love?
What's not to love? So, again, thank you for joining. I definitely recommend following him on Instagram if you're on there. It's unite_Godzilla_fans. He is on Twitter, just not active. But
I'll
apart
get to
from
it, I
that,
promise.
but apart from that, we do appreciate you listening. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Kaiju Apostle Pod. And then we're on Facebook, but I mean, Facebook's only for political debates anyway. So, we're really not doing much on there. But I will take the time to announce on this episode as well. By the time this does go live, we do have a Patreon page that will be up. There will be some more information on there as well, including, obviously what you would get for supporting the podcast. Now, that's not something where if this doesn't work out, we're going to keep doing it. But we do feel like that would not only help benefit the podcast itself, but you guys would get some awesome stuff in return. But all that information is going to go ahead and you can find that on Instagram or on our website at thekaijuapostle.com. There's a little support tab because as of right now, I don't know what that URL would be. My guess is patreon.com/kaijuapostlepod. But I will know that by the next episode. So thank you guys so much and gals for listening. And we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Kaiju Apostle Podcast, Building a Bridge Edition. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Kaiju Apostle Pod, along with our website, www.thekaijuapostle.com. Our previous episodes can be streamed on all major podcasting platforms, including iTunes, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and YouTube. Also, we have officially launched our Patreon page with the release of this episode. You can find more information about that at patreon.com/kaijuapostlepod. Again, we appreciate you listening, we appreciate your support, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.